This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Most people don't have any idea what we do, Helen. I have had some people approach me to ask me to help them kill themselves. Now, that was back in the beginning. I haven't had that request for a while, but I don't think the public has a really good idea of what death doulas do, and that's part of what Karen and I have undertaken to do, is have conversations with the public as much as we can to educate them on what we do and how we can help support them and fill the gaps.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. The co-founders of Death Doula Network International are my guests today, talking about death doulas and the value they bring to the care of people with serious illness. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
As a caregiver, you want comfort and dignity for your patient and convenience for yourself. The Quick Change Wrap offers all of that with a life-changing way to address male incontinence. It folds around the source of urine and wicks it away, protecting surrounding skin, clothing, and bedding. Use the Quick Change by itself or with an adult diaper for superior protection. A single caregiver can quickly change the wrap with no lifting or turning the patient. 800 hospitals use it. Now you can get it at home. Visit quickchange.com now. This episode is sponsored by the Death Doula Network International. Death Doula Network International has created an opportunity for death doulas to gain experience and confidence before they start doing the work of supporting people and families at end of life. DDNI is focused on building connections and growing the death doula industry. For more information, visit ddnint.com. Now here's today's episode.
These ladies are hilarious. We should have published the conversations before, the outtakes, the jokes, because it was pretty hilarious. My guests today are Joanne Haun and Karen Henderickson. They are the co-founders of Death Doula Network International. They are both death doulas. They're funny and warm, and they have some personal stories that they're going to be sharing about the work that they're doing. You're going to hear how personal perspective and personal loss has helped shape their doula practices. And they're also going to hear about the challenges that they have been facing as death doulas in Canada, being accepted into end-of-life teams and the perceptions that people have about the work that death doulas do. So you're going to enjoy this interview. They're warm and they're funny and they're very open about the work that they're doing and the organization that they have started. So here's my conversation with Joanne Haun and Karen Henderickson of Death Doula Network International. Joanne and Karen, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Thank you for having us here, Helen. We appreciate the invitation.
It's so good to see your faces. I'm so happy to have both of you on the show. I'm going to ask you an icebreaker question, each of you. And I didn't send this question to you, so we will just have to see what comes out of this. Karen, let's start with you. Tell me one thing that most people don't know about you. I stumped her.
You did. You totally stumped me.
Joanne nearly choked on her water. So I think that sounds like a story. So one thing most people don't know about you, Karen.
I think probably that I'm actually quite nice, but I didn't really mean that. Actually, I think what people really don't know is that I'm actually quite shy.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I haven't known you for very long, but I would not have thought that.
Yeah.
Okay, Joanne, your turn. What do most people not know about you?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask what most people don't know about Karen.
No, that sounds like a dangerous area to get into.
What most people don't know about me. That's a good question. Most people don't know. Oh, that's a hard one. Because, I tell people a lot of stuff. Most people don't know. I'd like to say that I'm a therapy clown, but a lot of people do know that.
You're a therapy clown?
Yeah. Hard to believe, isn't it?
I'm scared to ask about that, but
It's not a clown that needs therapy, just so you know. Helen,
okay.
that's not.
I got you.
Most people don't. I don't have a great answer for that. I'm sorry, Karen. What do you think? Because you know mostly about me, but then I don't know. Most people don't know I'm short.
Actually, that's a really good one for both of us.
Well, that's what I was thinking of for you, because people are always saying, "Oh my gosh, you're so short."
The people that we meet on Zoom.
On the Zoom call, nobody would know. Yeah.
Yeah, but in real life, when they see us, they both go, "You guys are so short."
Well, in my mind, you're both very tall people. How about that?
Bless your heart, Helen.
I've been teaching these ladies about Southernisms and what we say in the South, so they may have picked up some bad habits from our conversation. So we're going to move into the interview part of things where we're going to talk about your work as end-of-life doulas or death doulas. So Joanne, how did you get started as a death doula?
Well, in December of 2017, I was doing a telephone interview with a psychic because I had hit the wall in my professional life and I just needed to change. So I was speaking with her and going over what I did and how I deal with people. And she said to me, "I don't know why I'm saying this to you, but write this down, death doula." And I said, "What is that?" She goes, "Just Google it." And off we went through the conversation. So I get off the call with her, send a note to my friend Karen here and said, "Check this out. We have to look into this." And I also shared that with another friend of mine, Jan, who was down in Arizona at the time. January 2018, so a month later, my friend Jan was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So I was able to be with her and her family through her journey. As we are going through Jan's journey, death doula training came to my local hometown. So I thought, you know what? There's no coincidences. So I took the training. It was a 4-day course at that time. And every night I went to visit Jan, and she said to me, "Okay, so tell me what you've learned today." And she kept saying, "You have got to continue this work because there's so many gaps in the system, and what you're doing as a death doula is so important." I didn't really realize that until, Helen, I was with Jan the day that the oncologist suggested that she have radiation or chemotherapy. And, he was a lovely, lovely doctor, but he kept trying to encourage her to have the treatment. And so, Jan looked at him and said, "So what's that going to get me?" "Well, maybe a couple of more months." "And what's that going to look like?" "Well, your hair's going to fall out and you're going to be vomiting a lot." And she looked the doc in the eye and said, "I don't want that." Again, he tried to encourage her to go on with the treatment. And after a couple of times, I looked at the doc and said, "You're not going to win this. Just let it be and let's just find a different way to treat the pain." So it was a blessing that I was able to be there at that time. And then there was another point where Jan wanted to go home and she was in a lot of pain. So I happened to be there again at the hospital, and the doctor came in, and I asked the doc if we could send her home with some medication, to control the pain. This was in, that would have been February 2018. She's got stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She's dying. And the doctor said to us, in view of the opioid crisis at the moment, we're unable to send you home with medication. We both looked at him. Jan says, "You realize I'm dying, right?" He goes, "Yes." And I said to him, "So she's not going to become addicted because she's dying?" And he said, "Yes, but because of the opioid crisis, we can't do that." Anyways, the doc goes away. He came back a couple hours later and he said, "I lied. I had to tell them, and I'm not sure who them is, that you were worse off than you are, but I got you the medication to go home with." So Jan and I are looking at each other going, well, what would have happened if we hadn't, she kind of lost her stuff on the dock because, she was frustrated. And she said, "So what would have happened if I didn't lose my stuff on this doctor? They would have kept me in the hospital and medicated me." And again, she looked at me and said, "You've got to continue this work to help people navigate through these kinds of things so they don't have to have these arguments with the doctors." So that's kind of how I got into it. It's been an experience ever since.
Wow. We'll have to come back and revisit some of that. That's crazy and horrible. And thank goodness you were there to be an advocate for your friend.
Yeah, I was grateful.
Yeah. Okay, Karen, how about you? How did you get started as a death doula?
Well, it was just looking like it was so much fun when I was watching Joanne. I thought I'd get on the train too.
I can see how Joanne would make that look fun.
So at the time that Joanne was in 2018, Joanne was going through this process supporting her friend Jan and doing the education. I was leaving my insurance career for the third time with an intention of operating just as an independent coach, right? Running my own independent coaching practice. And, I was intrigued by what Joanne was doing and all of the information that was out there because we started diving in, right, to what was available online and what have you. And I was really actually connecting the fact that when people were showing up for me for coaching, part of their barriers was always coming from loss. Some kind of loss was creating barrier in people's lives, right? So people come to coaches when they want to make change. They can't have difficulty doing that themselves. And there was this block, and that block I could identify was always related to loss. And death in some way has shown up in my life in some of the most horrific ways from the time I was 17 right up until today. And I just knew that this was a space that I wanted to be in. And so I took the training as well in late 2018. And here we are.
Wonderful. Wonderful. There's a lot of, I think, misperception about what end-of-life workers do. And I say end-of-life workers because hospice obviously is grouped in that. People have this very mistaken idea of what hospice workers do. And the same is true for end-of-life doulas or death doulas. So, Joanne, I'll start with you. What do you think most people think death doulas do?
Most people don't have any idea what we do, Helen. I have had some people approach me to ask me to help them kill themselves. Now, that was back in the beginning. I haven't had that request for a while. But I don't think the public has a really good idea of what death doulas do. And that's part of what Karen and I have undertaken to do, is have conversations with the public as much as we can to educate them on what we do and how we can help support them and fill the gaps.
So, Joanne, you're saying that at the start of your practice, you had more people asking you if you would help them die. Mm-hmm. Do you think the information about end-of-life doulas and death doulas has become more mainstream? Is that why you're not hearing that question from people as much?
Yeah, I think so. And of course, the pandemic brought out, there's a lot more information. There's a lot more death doulas that are becoming public and on social media. There's been articles written about the value of a death doula. There's been more publications. I know up here in Canada, our local radios, that CBC radio has done a number of interviews with different doulas. So people are becoming a little bit more aware of what we do. And I think the understanding's it's getting better.
I think so too. I know that hospice teams in the U.S. are beginning to dialogue and collaborate more with death doulas to incorporate them into the team because their gifts are very unique a lot of times, and they help to round out, the comprehensive care of a hospice patient the way we do it here in the U.S. Okay, Karen, so now we know what most people think death doulas do. What do death doulas actually do? What is the work that you guys do?
I think, there's a whole vast array of the work that a death doula can step into. It can certainly, in the work that we do, we engage with individuals who are even healthy, and we help them to get really clear in relation to finding a place of acceptance in our shared mortality and making good, solid end-of-life plans that are meaningful and worthwhile and valuable for them as the individuals and also for the people that they potentially will be leaving behind. And so we sometimes do work with healthy people. People have a vision that we sit at bedside and the last final moments, and some of us do that as well too. But, it's that whole journey of helping individuals with diagnosis, helping them to find agency and advocacy for themselves, helping them to understand what options are really available to them, where they do have choice, that they have a right to advocate with their healthcare team. They have a right to advocate and have a sense of agency with their own family and those they care about, right? In my work, I've always supported an individual and their care team. So it's never just been one person. It's often been 4, 5, 6 people that I get engaged on contract with to support. It's the anticipatory grief. It's helping caregivers to make sure that they have the information that they need for advocacy as well too, both for themselves and for their person they're caring for. It's helping to sometimes mediate and facilitate conversations with healthcare team because there's a lot of misunderstanding, fear to ask questions when care goes wrong, because sometimes it does if it's home palliative care situations or, some home hospice care, sometimes care goes sideways. And families and individuals can be very fearful about having those conversations because they feel that power struggle. They need the care, so they don't want to, right? So I help people to have, I help people to have those honest, forthright conversations with their healthcare team. I help people to really understand what it means and what it looks like when your person's in those final stages of dying. We use a lot of Barbara Carnes material to help with that. But helping people to really know what they're going to be witness to and watching, and not being fearful and thinking there's a significant amount of pain, helping them about process, helping them and their people who may want to come to visit, sharing information with them that helps them first feel comfortable in the idea of coming to visit their person who's maybe, you're right, in their final days or hours of living, and then also helping them to understand how they can show up. So I'm doing some work right now with a lady and her care team, and we've just sat down and I've put some pieces of information and some resource together that they can utilize for the people who will be coming to visit, so that those individuals know how they can sit at bedside, how they can vigil, how they can still be there present, even if their person is semi-conscious or unconscious, the things that they can do, what they can say, all of these things that are so valuable for the individuals that are left behind, the survivors, right, who are going to carry their survivorship forward, and the person who's dying. So it's a very large bucket of things, and it's not necessary. There's some tangibles, but a lot of it is just about emotional, holistic support and guidance.
There are so many facets to the work that you're doing. And of course, it's incredibly valuable to have those advanced care plan conversations. When you talk about coming to grips with their mortality and talking about what that would look like for themselves and for their family and their caregiving village or caregiving unit, those advanced care plan conversations are incredibly valuable because it's way more than do not resuscitate. It's way more than medical power of attorney. It's where do you want to die? Do you have a spiritual directive, a spiritual care directive? Who would you like to be the person who is there providing postmortem care? All those details. And, hospice folks, at least in the United States, we don't have a lot of time to have those conversations, and we don't have them early enough.
It's exactly the same here. There isn't enough time.
Yeah. And we definitely don't push it upstream to do it early enough, as early as we should. So, Karen, when you explain to someone who's not working in the healthcare system, who doesn't have any experience with a death doula, when you explain to them what you do, what kind of responses do you get?
I get a lot of wows. Wow.
Wow, like I'm in awe, or wow, that's hard to understand?
Wow, we so need this help.
Oh,
wow.
Nice.
Yeah, wow, we so need this help, right? I position the work from the basis of, so I approach this work, my job is to guide, support, share resource, and help individuals and their care village or their care team or their family, however they define that, to feel capable and enabled to navigate this, right? So I always say I lead from behind, not from the front. And there's agency in that. But it's typically like, wow, my gosh, we need that so much. We need that, right? We need that.
People need that expert guide, but you can't do it for them. So leading from behind is super important.
And they do just need somebody to be able to really articulate how you can support, right? So when somebody reaches out to me, I spend a lot of time in the first conversation or two really trying to get a good understanding of what's actually going on for them beyond the illness, right? What are they struggling with? What are they hoping for? Right? What do they most fear, right? For themselves and their people. And then I share a little bit about how I can show up and support for them, and what my purpose and my intention in that is. And then I always offer them through those initial conversations some information or some guidance that even if I never hear from them again will be helpful.
Very good. So in the United States, we have interdisciplinary hospice teams. You've got nurses, social workers, chaplains, aides, bereavement coordinators, physicians, all sorts of different therapies, volunteers. And we have started in the last few years to really recognize the value of an end-of-life or death doula as part of a hospice team. With the doulas bringing these special gifts that they have and the special abilities that they have to be present with families in such a meaningful way. Joanne, do hospice teams incorporate death doulas in Canada? And how does that work?
No, we've had a challenge being recognized as part of the palliative care team. A lot of times, I know me personally, when I approach somebody at the hospice associations, let them know what they do, the first words that I receive are, that's what our volunteers do. I'm also a hospice volunteer. So I know that there is a distinction between the volunteer role and the doula role. There's more that we can do as doulas, but we're not well received. It's been a challenge.
I find that interesting that the volunteers are doing deep work like that.
They're not.
With patients.
That's the thing, Helen, is they don't understand the difference between the work that we as doulas do and the work that the volunteers do. Because the volunteers more or less are listeners. And I don't mean any disrespect. They push the tea cart around. At the hospice house here where I am. So they'll take the tea cart around, they'll visit the people in the palliative beds in the hospice house, which is a great service. But that's the surface, right? That's the surface kind of work. Whereas the doulas, we go in, we get to know the people and we have conversations with them. We do, some holding space, the same as the volunteers do, but we dig deeper. And we know the clients a lot longer than the hospice volunteers do.
Right.
So it's been a struggle trying to help educate them on the value of a death doula.
Well, I know that across the United States, there are end-of-life doulas and death doulas that are working as volunteers with hospice teams, but I think a lot of times they have been instructed to delineate, this is your volunteer role. You're there for companionship or household tasks, things like that, walking a dog, reading, having presence. Whereas your end-of-life doula skills, we don't really want you using those in this particular role. Yeah, I think we get into some of that here too.
As a solo caregiver for an adult male suffering with incontinence, the nightly interruption of a bedding and clothing change ensures that nobody gets a good night's sleep. Well, now, with a quick change wrap, you can make that change quickly with no lifting, turning, or rolling over. It takes just a couple of minutes, then you're both back to sleep. In fact, there's hardly any disruption to your male patient. He doesn't even have to be awake. The quick change wrap folds around the source of urine and wicks it away, protecting surrounding skin, clothing, and bedding. The quick change incontinence wrap that is so effective and convenient, it will change the way you provide care to your male patient, for the better. Combine the quick change wrap with an adult diaper for superior protection. It takes just a minute or two for one person to change the quick change wrap regardless of size, anatomy, or weight of the patient. 800 hospitals use it. Now you can get it at home. Visit quickchange.com now. This episode is sponsored by the Death Doula Network International. Death doulas are always seeking ways to gain experience and confidence before they start doing the work of supporting people and families at end of life. The Death Doula Network International has created that opportunity. The organization provides a deep dive into practice to develop a death doula's skills. More than just death education and learning, the Death Doula Network International is creating heartfelt connections. Sign up for their Skill Mastery Education Workshop starting on June 3rd. The Immersive Skill Mastery Program is for doulas who have taken a basic foundational course and want to develop their skill set and build confidence in their death doula practice. DDNI brings a unique and dynamic energy to this learning based on personal connection, engagement, and humor. Find out more at ddnint.com. Now, back to the conversation.
So, Karen, when you're partnering with somebody with serious illness, obviously you would like to be able to talk with them way in advance of the death, right? To create that relationship and begin that journey with them, helping them navigate. But when you're helping someone with a serious illness who is rapidly approaching a death, how do you work with them to provide this care to prepare them?
So the majority of the individuals that I've worked with, on average, I've been with them about 7 months, which for some, in comparison to some others, apparently seems to be like a very long time. But even if it's a short window of time, once there's sort of been some clarity on what's actually happening on the front end, if it looks like, death is going to be within a few months or a couple months or what have you, I very quickly in my sort of my first consult, I do say to them, I would like you to know a little bit more about me and my approach. And that is that I believe that honesty and truth is paramount to your ability to navigate this effectively, right? And so that means I may speak some truths that could be kind of difficult for you to receive, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm also here to help you navigate that. And so, I've already referenced this, right? I always use Barbara Karn's Blue Book, Gone From My Sight. And I introduced that book really early in my engagement with individual and their care team, whether it's months away or it seems like it's a couple months away, only from the basis of there's resource and information in here that I'm really going to encourage you when you're ready to take a look at. And if it looks like it's within a couple months, I'm going to say to them, I really encourage you to take a look at this right now. You don't have to look at it all at once, but it's really important for you to review it. This is going to help to alleviate your fear and give you some preparation for what to expect. So that's the one piece, right? And then, when we're closer to the end, my engagement with them is more often, more regular, because there's more going on, right? At the 7-month point, it's not as often as when we're down to the last couple months. And always encouraging open dialogue and conversation, trying to facilitate that amongst people as well, and navigating what's working, what's not working. Some of the approach I always use, if the individual at the center with the illness still has the capacity, is that the person with the illness has a responsibility to ask for what they want and speak of what they need. So not to withhold those. And anybody that is there in a support position to provide care, like if it's like a family member or a loved one or their care village, I love that language that you use. If it's someone within there, they have a responsibility to be very clear, open, and honest about what they can support with and what they cannot support with, so that we're not getting into the frustrations and the anger and the resentments and the things that creep in, but so that we can find creative ways to fill the gaps, right?
Right.
But it's encouraging the open dialogue, always checking in on what's going on, right? What's happening at this moment in time, both for individual and the people that are looking after them, and sharing information and knowledge when I have it, or resource, and helping them to navigate. And that isn't always exactly the same way. But for me, it always starts with the Blue Book, because the Blue Book really truly helps to identify that this is really happening. Because so often what occurs is that there's a resistance for their people to go into hospice, because if they go into hospice, then they're going to die. The average time, probably for you too, the average time for individuals in hospice here is less than 2 weeks.
Right. It's very, very similar to what we experience here.
And it's because that, the language our physicians and medical teams are using, and if it's your loved one, you have a resistance to wanting to hear the truth anyway. So if it's not being stated emphatically to you, you're probably not going to pick up on it, right? And so it's about having those truthful conversations in ways that are safe, and that I can do it in a way that sort of alleviates fear and creates some understanding, versus just a complete resistance to it, right? Communication
is probably the biggest skill that a doula needs to have, is
That's
what it
right.
sounds like. To be kind and honest at the same time, and then to help people sort of pick up the pieces and move forward in a way that is healing and whole. And that's a lot to ask. That's a lot to ask of any one clinician, any one end-of-life worker. Important work, I think. So, Joanne, in your work as a death doula, what do you find most challenging?
Being accepted as part of the team. Being accepted to be able to help the client fill the gaps, and being understood on what a death doula really does and how we can help. And actually charging for our services, because people don't feel that the value is in the death doula, right? They pay for the funeral director, for the grief counselor, they pay for even for flowers and what have you. But for some reason, when I tell a client, here's what I charge, quite often I don't hear back from them.
Interesting. I think it's kind of like handwork and creative work. Doula work is an art.
Mm-hmm.
It's not licensed.
It's not regulated.
By the government. Right. It's very different. And there is it's priceless. There's an incredible value to work like that. It's just a lot harder to quantify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can understand the frustration. Where do you meet the most resistance when it comes to a death doula being incorporated into the team? Do you meet more resistance among healthcare workers or among the private sector?
The healthcare workers, again, they don't accept us as part of a valuable team. We're not invited in to have discussions with the healthcare workers. Yeah, it's been challenging and frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. So, Joanne, to flip that around, what do you find most rewarding about your work with the dying?
When they look at me and say, wow, I never thought of that. Or what a change. These questions that you've been asking me, what a difference that's going to make to my end of life. And we talk about a lot of times after death care as well, and people don't give any consideration to that. Or the celebration of life. I don't want a funeral. Well, once they understand that the funeral is for those left behind, and how that can help with the grieving process, I've seen a switch in people, and they understand that better. If I can make one little change in somebody's end of life, one little difference in their end of life, then it fills my heart.
It sounds like it's a very fulfilling career path to be able to work as a doula.
It is, but it can also be very frustrating. I have a young client now, 35 years old. She's got 2 children. I used to babysit her in kindergarten. She's got a rare form of cancer, was diagnosed in September of 2022. She's still with us, and she hasn't accepted the fact that she's dying yet. And I'm encouraging her to put memory boxes together for the kids, to do recordings for the kids. And she told me last time I saw her, she said, you know what? I feel as though once I order those boxes, that it's all real. And I looked at her and I said, you know what, sweetie? It is real. It is real. But she hasn't accepted it yet. So I'm sitting back here going, oh my goodness, she could die at any time. And these projects for her children are not going to be done yet. It's a challenge.
You have to wonder if, for someone like that, if she thinks if I get these things done, then my work here is done and I've given myself permission, a release so that I can die.
I think that's exactly it. We've had conversations around that and not done with her yet.
That's good. Hold on to her. Joanne, I want to ask you, so this client that you have, she's fairly young, and I know that one of the impacts I noticed as I aged as a hospice nurse was when I began to care for people who were younger than I was, same age or younger than I was. I was deeply impacted by that. How do you find yourself impacted by caring for someone who's, not only do you know her, but she's younger, I'm assuming younger than you are. How does that impact you?
She went to school with my oldest son, right? It's been a real education because I do know her and I know her mom and dad, and I'm able to distance myself, and I'm getting a real good education watching the mom and dad that are watching their daughter die, essentially. So I'm looking at it from the parent's perspective, but I'm also looking at it from her perspective. And so many times she will look at me and say, what 35-year-old has to deal with this stuff?
Right.
And it is very impactful. And it's hard, but somehow I feel that my heart is being called towards hospice for children. I lost my son when he was 12. So I know, unfortunately, I know the pain of a parent that has gone through that. I watched that son of mine provide support to a young child when he was in. So my son Andy was in the hospital. He had an open heart surgery, and he was 10 at the time. There was a young boy in the bed across the room from him, and this 10-year-old got out of the bed, the little boy, and he goes and he sits on this other kid's bed and he starts talking to him. And the little guy says to Andy, I am scared. I don't know what to do. This 10-year-old on his own opened his shirt, showed the scar that went down his chest, and he said, I just went through this, and so can you. And I thought, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So if I can do that for a child and their parent, I think that's where my heart lies.
That's an incredible gift to be able to take that kind of experience in your life, that kind of pain, and make meaning from it. It's an incredible gift that you give to the people you work with.
Thank you.
I've always said it's, a really good interview when somebody during the interview cries a little bit. So that may be me before we get done. So that's really your why, to have that kind of reward. There's a lot of wear and tear that comes with the kind of work that you do. Joanne, what do you do for self-care when you've had intense experiences with work?
My first go-to, Helen, is to go out in nature. I'm very fortunate. My backyard looks like a park. It's not huge, but there's grass, there's cedars all around it. I have deer that walk through my backyard regularly, and quail. And so often I'll just sit outside and just be. Or I'll go down to the lake. I've got an inflatable kayak. I'll chuck the kayak in the lake and just go out and just paddle a little bit and just be in nature and not have to listen to anybody, be in solitude. Yeah. That helps me unwind. Or I call my friend Karen.
She's your go-to. If anybody's going to understand what you do, it'll be Karen.
Karen has been with me through the worst parts of my entire life, starting with the death of my son. So she knows it all. So yeah, she's my go-to. Nice.
She's your person. I love it. So Karen, let's go to you. What part of doula work do you find most challenging?
I think most definitely I would agree with Joanne from the perspective of this lack of acknowledgement or acceptance within healthcare team. And so, we show up to support an individual and their people in this process, but we also can, by filling those gaps, we can create a good integration between healthcare and patient and family, because there isn't the time or the resource for the full communication, for the full knowing what's going on, all of these things, right? So we can help the individual and their people, but we can also help the healthcare team if they would just be open to us playing an integral role. I do feel that in some cases, certainly in some situations that I've been involved with, where I have really had to assertively advocate for family, in where things have really gone sideways in care, there's a defensiveness, there's a lack of acknowledgement because a doula doesn't spend all these years in school to become an RN or to become a palliative, right? Like any of that. And, this work isn't about that medical professional stuff. It's about communication and holding space and awareness and helping people to navigate these so important emotional conversations. And so I've even had a situation where I was supporting a mom and her 30-year-old son who eventually died from Hodgkin's lymphoma. But in the process of supporting them, the actual medical healthcare team actually wanted, in order to have me actively involved in some of the discussions around the case and what was going on and the goals of care and everything, they actually wanted the mom to sign a piece of paper that said if they chose, they could push me out of the care team. And this was care that was being provided in the home. So there can be a lot of resistance. And that's really not effective for individual who's ill, or their family or their care village or healthcare providers. Because at the end of the day, I think we're all supposed to be there for the same thing, which isn't about our egos, our own desires for outcome. It's about the person at the center, right?
Yeah. And how devaluing that must be for an end-of-life or death doula to experience that kind of, well, you're expendable. You might be great in some situations, but we want to make sure there's an escape hatch in case we need to jettison you off the team.
Yeah. And, our sense in that particular situation was it was just because there was a sense that I was making things more difficult. We were actually moving to hold them accountable for care that they committed to. Right. Mm-hmm. So I was making it more difficult in that scenario. And the unfortunate thing is that some doulas have I like to believe anyways, I've got a fair backbone and I'm pretty bold and confident in how I show up in this space. But if you aren't, then that can really jeopardize, right? really
Right.
jeopardize your willingness or desire to move forward with this work. So I think that's one of the most challenging pieces. And then another piece I think is about this. So we talk all the time about our role is to make things better than they might otherwise have been. And so that means that we don't show up with our own agenda. Doesn't matter what we wish the outcome to be, because it's not our outcome. Right. And so, and Joanne talked about that too, right? Sometimes it's hard. Right. When if just this one thing, the positive difference that it might make, but we can't be attached to that. Right. So it's staying detached in that way, that the outcome belongs to the individual and their village of people that are supporting them. It's not our outcome. We just show up to help make it a little bit better than it might otherwise have been.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think, we use this expression in end-of-life care about a good death.
Mm-hmm.
But we enter into these relationships with patients and families. We already know what their good death should look like.
Mm-hmm.
At home, surrounded by your family with all your symptoms managed. That's the blanket. But a lot of people don't want to die at home. A lot of people want to die in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do enter in with our own outcomes in mind, that this is what this is supposed to look like. We have expectations of how this is supposed to move, and it's based more on algorithms and evidence base and a care plan that we can, pull out of an electronic health record system and click the buttons, bullet point out each of the things that's supposed to happen, when reality is that people don't fit into those things. Yeah, people don't fit into that. Okay, so let's flip this. What do you find the most rewarding about the work that you do as a doula? And you have such a good smile on your face. I know this is going to be good.
It makes me emotional. We change people's lives. We change people's lives. We change their death, and we change the lives of the people that are left behind. When I stood at graveside with that mom who lost her 30-year-old son, and she said to everybody that was there and had an intention on sharing this, but said, I would be in this grave with my son if not for Karen. That's pretty powerful. You made a difference, right? When you work with individuals for a month or 2 months and they say, you've made such a difference for us already. Thank you so much. You've made this so much easier for us. Thank you so much. I didn't know we could do that. Thank you so much. I've never asked my dad what he really wanted. Thank you for helping me to do that. Every one of those. Right? These are the big things that to me matter in this work. We're all humans. It's about our humanness. And if our death doesn't teach us to show up emotionally for each other through the way that we can do this and supporting them and how to navigate, how to have the conversations, how to get really clear about who and what matters most, if not in your last months, right? What else is there? And so if I impact one person in that group of people, that's significant for me.
Yeah.
Right? When a daughter says to me, because of the work that was done, that you did with my mom with respect to her advanced care plans, we knew when she ended up in hospital and we got the call that, mom's had a fall, right? We know she has applied for MAID. We know that she has a DNR, right? Do you want us to keep her going till you get here? When a daughter says to me, I knew it was okay for me to say, it's okay. If she's gone by the time we get there, that's okay. And then afterwards say to me, it was because she got so clear about what she did and didn't want, had discussed it with her people, that they were okay. No regret, no questioning. They can just be in their grief for raw grief without all of the other complicated stuff that gets in the way.
Right.
That's it. Right there.
Yeah. It's not about the recognition. It's not about the reward. It's about the knowing.
Right.
The knowing that you help somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which isn't that, or shouldn't that be the why for every end-of-life worker?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a powerful, powerful thought. So, Joanne, I have one last question for both of you. What would you guys want people to know about who you are as death doulas? Joanne, we'll start with you. What would you want people to know about who you are as a doula?
That's a tough question there, Helen. I want people to know that my intention is to make a difference, as Karen had said, right? My intention is to help educate them on their options and what to expect. And again, using Barbara Karn's books, right? It explains, when mom's lying in bed and she's nearing the end of life and she's not eating or drinking, that's okay. And I want people to understand that we're here to help them navigate through everything as much as we can, but we're also there to support them, and that we will be there by their side as much or as little as they want us to. And I think that's it.
So, Karen, if I told you could have anything on your wish list for end-of-life care, what would be on your wish list?
What would be on your wish list for end-of-life care generally?
Yes.
That wish list, or that wish, would be that there is an acknowledgement that we, regardless of how robust our healthcare medical system is, there is this area that needs to be filled, and doulas can do that. That integrates all of the connectivity between healthcare team, individual, family or loved ones, and community. And that death in and of itself, right? There's so much when we start the conversation that we don't have to be afraid of. We don't have to be afraid. It's like so many things in life, I'll never forget when I was young. I used to be really afraid of thunderstorms and lightning. And I was like 5 years old, and my dad would come into my bedroom and he would open the curtain on the window. I'd be crying and he would hold me in his arms and we'd look out the window and he would talk to me about what was actually happening and what was going to come next. My dad at the age of 5 taught me that when you know what's going on, when you talk about it, you can still be afraid, but it's not as scary.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be scary.
I love it.
And we can help with that as an integrated piece of that team that supports individuals and family.
Absolutely. There is such a necessary place for doulas when it comes to end-of-life teams.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are doing some fantastic work in the doula space. You have an organization, the Death Doula Network International. It just changed names. You guys are morphing and reiterating. Joanne, tell the listeners how they can connect with what you guys are doing and be involved in the work.
Well, the best way to do that, Helen, is to go onto our website, which is DDNI.com, right? I'm still getting used to the changeover, and it's got a list of our upcoming events. It has a roster of who our network members are in different areas of the world. And they can reach me at Joanne, JO-ANNE at DDNINT.com. And my friend Karen is Karen at DDNINT.com.
It's hard when you change over.
Yeah, it's harder when you don't know how to speak too.
Well, I'm going to have links to your website, your Facebook and your Instagram, because you've got a social media presence, and your emails. I'll have all of that in the show notes so that listeners can go straight in and connect with the work that you're doing, check out the education opportunities that are there, and see how they can become involved as well. Thank you guys so much for being with me today. Karen, what last thought would you leave the listeners with today when it comes to the Death Doula movement and the work that you're doing?
Last thing. Oh my gosh, what a question.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah. I think, really the real thing for me, the one last thought is that, a death doula can help you to embrace and find a level of acceptance with our shared mortality, be that of your person or you yourself. And there is no better educator in life than death.
I love it. That's a perfect thought for the ending. Thank you guys so much for being with me today. I'm so glad to talk to you.
It's been a pleasure.
Blessed to be here.
The work that these two ladies are doing to bring death doulas into the spotlight, bring them into mainstream end-of-life care is so important. Doulas help fill a gap that we all know is there. We all know it's there. Hospice teams know it's there. We know that there are times that our patients and families need us for extended periods of time, like when a patient begins to actively die, and we are not there with them. We are not there with them. Doulas have a very unique role. They are way more than just a hospice volunteer, way more. They help prepare people for the end-of-life journey. They help with advanced care plan conversations, legacy projects, and you heard Joanne talk about the legacy projects that she's working on with one of her patients that's a younger woman. And it sounds like it's incredibly rewarding work for both of these ladies. So I would encourage you to go into their website, which is DDNINT.com. See the classes and the resources and the education that they're offering. You can also check them out on Facebook and Instagram, DDN International on Facebook, and then DD Network International on Instagram. Check them out. If you want to get in touch with Karen or Joanne because you're interested in the work that they're doing and you're interested in the classes, you can contact Karen at ddnint.com and then email Joanne at jo-anne@ddnint.com. But if you didn't catch all that, I'll have it all in the show notes. You'll be able to go in and see that information, check out their website, and learn more about death doulas and see the work that they're doing at Death Doula Network International. Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram, and send your questions or comments by email to host@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.